Good evening and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, Donna Deschenes. The race for Worcester County Sheriff this year is pretty crowded, and I'm going to try to talk to as many of the candidates as possible in the short amount of time that we have before November 2nd. To that end, my guest this evening is a candidate for Worcester County Sheriff. It's my pleasure to welcome Keith Nicholas.
Hi.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I had an opportunity to read your material, and in your material it says that you have experience in law enforcement, but you're not connected to the Department of Corrections. Can you fill in a little of your background? Yeah,
my background, like I said, law enforcement mostly, about 14 years, around 1996, 97, 96 started. I worked in various capacities. From campus police, medical center police, also town police. And from those experiences, I've dealt with a lot of various issues, that society faces today. How families are broken by crime, alcohol, drugs, things of that nature. So I've seen firsthand on the outside the effects that criminal offenders have on not only the families and the victims, but also their own families. By ending up in jail, they affect obviously the outcome of their own family. A lot of them are parents of young children or even older children.
What draws you to the Department of Corrections and specifically to the position of Worcester County Sheriff?
As a police officer and a taxpayer, I've kind of got tired of seeing how the sheriff's offices run as more or less a political stepping stone. For years, it's been for the last easily 3 or so decades, the office has been used as a political connection. It's people that you get hired or promoted based on who you know, who you support, and it continues to be that way today. And I don't believe, as a taxpayer and a law enforcement professional, that that's the way a department should be run, especially on tax dollars and the fact that it's public safety. As I say, my slogan goes, is public safety first, not politics. And that's what the office needs to get back into, focusing on its core functions and operating responsibly in that way.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. And one of the things that you talk about in your materials is the promotion process within the Department of Correction and within the Worcester County Sheriff's Office. And other candidates for the position have said, well, you should just be able to pass the exam and get promoted.
Yeah.
You said that there's more to it than that.
Exactly. I brought that point up recently because, like you said, that one of the competitors who works here now, he stated that the promotional process has been professionalized, which it really hasn't. Like you said, it's still, you pass the exam, but you say you get a 98, I get a 70, or whatever the passing score would be, to 80. But because I am, a supporter of the sheriff, or I'm tight with someone else, administration, I get promoted over you. Although maybe you're more qualified, because you scored better, you might have a better background than I do. But I think the scoring process, the exam process alone, is not enough. All it is just, it's a minimum threshold, really. But at that point, they can, as long as they pass the exam, they can still promote whoever they want. And that's not the way a promotional exam is supposed to be. It's supposed to be placed by ranking, by score, background, and whatnot, interviews and stuff. It's all scored together. Then those higher scores are the ones who are eligible for it, not just anyone who passes the exam.
One of the criticisms of the current sheriff in his campaign for state auditor is that he's raised so much money from other people in the Department of Corrections and in the Sheriff's Department that he doesn't need to take state funding for his campaign.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are people in the campaign for Worcester County Sheriff who are in the same position.
Yeah, there's at least one candidate, again, similar to, obviously not at the dollar amount as Sheriff Glotis, but there's another candidate who pretty much came out with a hefty bank account, warchest, for the campaign. You know, like Sheriff Glotis, you know, you build that up over time. Most likely, like anyone would think, that because he knew he was going to run for something else, that's why you build it up. He's coming out with, you know, more money than all of his competitors combined. You know, so that's going to tell you something. A guy had it in the back of his mind for a while. As well as, you know, one of my competitors came out with, he's got the most amount of money, and he's still actively doing fundraisers and stuff like that. You know, which again, I think it's misleading up until the point where they're actually fundraising for the position they're running for. I think when they're building up that, you know, the war chest, as they call it, based on a position they're already in, I think people that contribute to that are contributing it believing that they're going to continue in a position they're in, not run for something else. So I think, you know, a lot of people kind of get duped, so to speak, for supporting someone else, supporting someone who ends up taking that money running for something else.
Well, let's now juxtapose those two things. Let's put the promotion process beside the fundraising process, and that within the jail and within the sheriff's department, that's got to have an impact on morale, to know that there are some of your coworkers who are contributing to a political campaign, and their name may show up on a group of different lists.
Right. There are, you know, a majority of them take a neutral position because of that factor. By taking a position, you know, they risk their future, so to speak. You know, it determines whether or not, if they support the right candidate, you know, they could bump into specialty positions that get promoted, or, you know, if they support the wrong person, they could end up staying, you know, in a cell block for, you know, their careers. So it's really, a lot of them, like I said, take a neutral position so that they're not showing the favoring one or the other. And yeah, like I said, it does, anytime they support another candidate, the name and position is going to show up their employer. So again, that's exactly why they try to stay out of that. You know, I think by doing that, you know, if one particular candidate tends to get more money from the group of correctional officers in this example, that tends to be I think a downfall, because that particular candidate, right off the bat, you know, owes something to somebody. You don't get that much push from one particular group, you know, financially, as well as, you know, physically, as far as holding signs and whatnot, and not feel like you owe something back to them. You know, where so in my particular case, or even a couple of the other candidates, have taken no money from any of the COs, and we plan to keep it that way. You know, the support I would like from them is just say, hey, you know, they vote for me. That's about it. You know, I'm not looking for it, because I'm not going to give them any favors back. I promise no favors yet, and I plan to do not. Haven't given any and won't give any.
Let's talk about what you plan to do about the fact that just about every group in the Commonwealth that's providing a service is facing fiscal restraints and income cuts, budget cuts. How do you, and at the same time, this is specifically obvious with the Department of Corrections and the Sheriff's Office, because you're dealing with an increasing number of inmates with a shrinking budget.
Yeah.
How do you propose to deal with that?
Overall, it's just the simple, proper management of how those funds are allocated, you know, what they're using for within the jail, within the Sheriff's Office. Within the last 2 years, the Worcester County Sheriff's Office budget has dropped $5.6 million. That's a lot. And, you know, so they haven't laid off too many people. From what I understand, no union jobs were lost. There are a few support positions and stuff like that let go. I think a lot of it you need to look at. Overall, they have over 600 employees. Only 300, just under 300 are actually correctional officers. The rest are support and administrative staff. I think a big portion of that we need to look at is the administrative staff. They're in the right position. Do we need as many managers, directors, you know, right up to deputy superintendents? How many do we need? And can we combine some positions, you know, streamline some of the processes to eliminate positions, and not necessarily overall positions, but to be able to eliminate the money being spent on, I guess, the higher end of it, the administration end, and putting it to hiring more correctional officers, because the correctional officer at the correctional officer level, they're very understaffed. So safety is a concern, and that's something I want to focus on, is trying to maximize the safety of the facility before we go ahead and spend money on more programs and services.
You talk about a need for additional corrections officers. And you also talk about in your materials about the fact that Worcester County Sheriff's Department and the corrections officers are amongst the lowest paid in the Commonwealth. If you had to make a choice between more corrections officers and bringing the salaries of corrections officers up so that they're more in line with the statewide corrections officers, which would you choose?
I think middle ground on that. I would, if I had to, lessen the number of positions that I would increase in order to give them a pay increase, I would do that. But I wouldn't overall eliminate, considerations of adding more staff, because again, you could pay them more, but they're, when safety is still at risk, you don't want that. But at the same time, you could add a bunch of guys and have poor morale. We don't want that either. I don't look at it as them being, anytime soon, in reality, them being the best paid in the state, but they should be up, at least in the middle ground. Probably, I do believe they should be in the top half, only because it is they have one of the worst overcrowding situations. They're one of the older facilities, and they deal with, the conditions they work in. But at the same time, like I said, I don't believe in overly lucrative contracts. I know that's always been an issue, union contracts. As sheriff, they'll never, correction officers, or even police officers, I know as a police officer, are never going to be rich, and that's the way it should be. But they should earn a decent wage. They should be able to, be happy to know they're not in the bottom of the totem pole as far as pay. That's a huge morale issue. And they have, they kind of pushes high turnover rate because they work in, terrible conditions with terrible pay. So not many people would stick around for that. A lot of guys do tend to stick around because of the, the overall benefits and stuff like that. It's a state job. They look at it that way, and they stick around and just do their time and retire. But, some guys, they tend to be 20, 25 years of misery. I don't want that. I don't want anyone to go to work miserable. I think by putting them in a reasonable bracket for pay and increasing the conditions overall, the Worcester County Sheriff's Department could be an employer of choice in a correctional setting. And that's what my aim is, to make it an employer of choice in the state. Not, gee, I couldn't get another job, or I just got out of the military, or, I knew somebody, they hooked me up with a job type thing. I want people to come to work for the Worcester County Sheriff's Office for the pride, overall conditions of the job. They want them to want to choose Worcester County over any of the other correctional agencies.